But yeah, everyone, thank you so much for coming as well. Just a quick little intro, just like Dave had mentioned, it's so funny that we had met almost a year ago now. It was an event in San Francisco for anyone who's local. We, like he had mentioned, we were talking about this particular bill. And it's so cool that we came together in that moment. I didn't even know Dave, but my colleague had introduced me, Yolande, and said, oh, you need to meet this incredible person who is spearheading the AI Alliance here in San Francisco. And so I was like, okay, like this sounds really interesting. And so it's so cool to see that now I'm able to, and the entire Neo4j team is able to work more closely with the AI Alliance and actual build applications together, integrations, as well as just work more closely together. So highly advise those who have not gotten as involved in the Alliance to get more involved, either in a working group or etc., because this partnership is one that I think is going to go on for years. So it's really robust, and it's definitely the time, especially being in the Bay Area, but especially the time in artificial intelligence. So let's get started. All righty. So I'm going to, boom, there we go. I'm going to do perfect. Beautiful. Love it, love it, love it. All right. Everyone can see? Yes.
Yep.
Love
Awesome.
it. All right, let's get started. So just a basic introduction of who I am so you know who you're talking to. So my name is Nya Maclin. I'm on the Developer Relations team with Neo4j with the incredible Yolande, who is also in the audience today. So my background is a JavaScript engineer. Are there any people who hate JavaScript in the space? Yeah, I see a few hands. There's some thumbs up, but some are like, no, you know, boo JavaScript. So my training is actually in JavaScript. However, of course, I also started to learn Python as well. So this entire project is in Python. Remember, I'm not a Python expert, but we're all working towards making sure that we can communicate with artificial intelligence and in the languages that it understands, specifically with data science. And Python definitely is that language. So I wanted to put that caveat out there. But a lot of times when I'm giving talks, it will be around, you know, what are some of the things, especially within artificial intelligence, what are some of the pressing, what are some of the most pressing both issues that are happening within artificial intelligence and like some of the most or the biggest advances that are happening within the field. And so today I'm going to be talking about this concept of GraphRAG. I think a couple people might have heard of it before, especially being an AI Alliance member. I hope you would have heard it before, but if not, that's also totally fine. But a couple of the other concepts that I really care about as well within my career are ethics, AI ethics as well, governance and safety. Since I had previous to working in tech, I had worked a number of years in the public sector as a chief of staff for the Massachusetts House of Representatives. So the intersection of tech and governance is very, very important to me. And then I love to also talk about AI safety and what responsible artificial intelligence also looks like. So a couple of things as well, things that I love to do on the side. Sometimes I have taught a number of courses at universities, high schools as well, making sure that we are getting the youngest and the brightest into the tech field in general, making sure that we're opening up the doors of this field to people who want to come into the field. And I've also taught at various nonprofits as well. Women Who Code, for example, Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code, if anyone has heard of these organizations, Resilient Coders, some local nonprofits as well. So these are some of my passions, and I think that this speaks to who I am as an engineer and the things that I care about, and a little bit about why I'm going to be talking to you all today. So let's dive right in. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So today we are going to talk about, I'm going to give, for folk who don't know this concept of GraphRAG, let me just see, and I want to make sure that I can see everyone's faces. So let me see if I can change this layout so that I can actually see everyone. Adjust the view. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Lovely, lovely. And can I see everyone? Yeah, oh, good. It's always good. Yes, I love that. Perfect. All right. Oh, good, good. Yeah, I can see everyone. Okay, I can just see most people. All right, so like I said, I'm going to give a background around what GraphRAG is, because I think a couple people might be familiar with the concept, but not necessarily understand what it is and how it works, and even what are the benefits of GraphRAG. We're going to go over what GraphRAG is versus a normal RAG pipeline with a vector-only base. And then we're going to get into how GraphRAG is beneficial for applications. And then, I'm going to say, don't listen to me. We have lots of different research from other organizations who are actually implementing GraphRAG. And GraphRAG is not a Neo4j based concept as well. We are pioneers of GraphRAG and using GraphRAG because we're a graph database, but we're not the ones who own GraphRAG or anything like that. So we're going to talk about some other companies and organizations who've already implemented GraphRAG into their LLM development. And then we're going to get into Alleycat, which is I think the crux of what we're here to see. So I'm going to give a demo of the Python application Alleycat and my GraphRAG implementation for how I added GraphRAG to the application. So, okay, so that's the lay of the land. I hope you're ready. We're going to have a great hour together, or a great couple 45 minutes, and let's dive in. All right. So first of all, I want to chat with you all about the normal RAG pipeline. All right. So we have our normal RAG pipeline here, and many people, I'm sure, are very aware that in a normal RAG pipeline, you're going to take down a few PDFs. You're going to chunk those PDFs and then index those PDFs using a text embedding model. And then when it's time to query those chunks, you're going to use that same embedding model to fetch the top K or the top X number of relevant documents, and then pass the, can I make full screen share? Yeah, let me absolutely do that right now. Oh, let me do that so that, okay, is that better? Hopefully it is. Awesome. Okay, thank you for that point. Always got my eye out on the chat. So thank you. All right, so like I was saying, we're going to use that same embedding model to fetch the top K number of chunks and then pass those into a LLM itself. And so, and then you're going to use those top K chunks to get the final answer from those documents. So a normal RAG approach it usually works perfectly when you're doing something like analyzing documentation, right? When people ask me when to use RAG versus this concept that we have, which is GraphRAG, usually I like to say that if you're trying to answer a question that could have easily been answered via a search engine, for example, so Google or Brave for those privacy aware folks just like myself, then RAG, vector-based RAG, is normally enough, right? So for example, I want to find, give me a low sugar ice cream, right? Give me an example of a low sugar ice cream. Something that is easily searchable via a search engine. You can use vector-based RAG for that, and that would actually be very simple. Vector-based RAG will handle it very well. But if you want to generate insights from the data, right, that can't trivially be answered from a search engine, that is where something like GraphRAG comes into play and would be better suited for your application. So for example, like if you're trying to do source code analysis, right, or you have a supply chain question, or anything that requires an aggregation or a concatenation of data from different documents, GraphRAG is, I think, a winner here when it comes to that conversation. And so just a little bit of research for those who are in the room. Has anyone read this paper itself? So Retrieval-Augmented Generation for Large Language Models, a survey was Gao et al. They produced it in 2024. Okay, I see it. 2 hands. Okay. That's excellent. That's excellent. So we have a few people in the room, and we have a lot of people in the room. Most people have not read it, but I know a few people have. So in this paper, there are Gal and their team articulate that there are three basic RAG paradigms. So we talk about the native RAG paradigm, an advanced version of the RAG paradigm, and then modular RAG as well. So if you want to dive more into these paradigms, yeah, thank you for providing that link, Tim. You're the best. If you want to dive more into those paradigms or read the white paper, this is an excellent source to learn more about the general RAG, right? So definitely hit up the link that Tim had just dropped. So this is some great basic understanding. Also, if you're new to RAG in general. But here we go as well. So we have a question here. What are the company policies on remote work? Just to show you another example of when RAG works perfectly, semantic search, a native RAG approach can work. So this question is similar to a documentation question, right? You'd find the documents that are relevant to company policies, pass that to an LLM, and then an LLM will then output a pretty standard answer. So a simple question like this is perfect for a native RAG approach. You do not need to add GraphRAG to your application or ecosystem if these are the kinds of questions that your users are asking. And for the native RAG approach as well. So if you took the native approach and just returned the top K chunks from a vector index, this is a similar question. What are the payment terms for a specific company contract? Then you would get those text chunks with different context. Like in this example, we are getting 3 different payment terms for 3 different contracts, which for a native RAG approach is kind of irrelevant for your specific question about a specific contract. So basic similarity search would fail in this case because it's giving you all this extra fluff that you didn't ask for and that you didn't need. And yes, I'll put a caveat there as well that you can overcome this with, for example, basic metadata filtering. So if your chunks have metadata and then you can filter, for example, on a company ID or something like that, in which the scenario you can use structured data to enhance the results. However, there are even times when metadata filtering doesn't work as well either. So because vector indexes will often return various text chunks, and we would love to get text chunks back with the context, right? So if you have even more contracts in this case, right, a native RAG approach could completely fail. So instead of asking for 1 contract or 3 contracts, you ask for 200 contracts. You know, what if you have 200 contracts that expire this month? An LLM won't know, right? Because it's only grabbing the top K number of text chunks that that can give you. It's only giving you the top K text chunks, and that can give you some inaccurate or even just partial results, right? So how do we solve this particular issue? But in general, this is just a really good slide to summarize where vector-only database RAG can fall short. So I'm not going to read this entire slide, but just a little bit of information for you. This is also being recorded, so you can come back and refer to it later. But some of the different reasons why vector databases fall short. Vector database with RAG, vector-only RAG, fall short. So all in all, when you need questions that require advanced filtering, counting, for example, aggregation, and then sorting, it usually can't be answered with a basic RAG approach or even basic text embeddings from vector search on its own. And so that's when we come to this idea and understanding of knowledge graphs. So thank you, Cool Hat. So knowledge graph, yes, big proponent of the knowledge graph, everyone. So this is where and why using things like knowledge graphs are necessary when it comes to RAG and getting that full contextual response, right? So has anyone heard of or even used knowledge graphs before? Okay, not many. Not many. Okay, a couple. Nope, not yet, but a couple thumbs up. Awesome. We love some knowledge graphs. It's excellent for context, right? Excellent for context. So a knowledge graph, for those who don't know, a knowledge graph is really, in general, it's just an organized representation of real world entities and relationships. So it's typically stored in a graph database. Neo4j is a graph database. We're knowledge graph native, I would say. So it's natively stored in a graph database, and it also natively stores relationships between your data, which is really, really paramount, because for most of us who are either back-end developers or have worked with databases before, my background, for example, was in relational databases. So for those who know, relational databases, you often have to do a number of different complex joins in order to better understand what are the relationships between data, right? And so knowledge graphs are excellent because they inherently store all that information on the relationship within the database. So that's excellent. And entities in knowledge graph. So we have nodes, which are also entities, but entities in knowledge graph are things like objects, right? Events, situations, concepts, right? People, places, things, nouns. So, and then we have the relationship. We have nodes and then relationships. It's just a line that draws between the two nodes. Relationships, which are also called edges, between the entities that captures the context, right? The context or the meaning of how these two things are connected. So just a real life example. So I could say that I'm a node, Nya. Hello, I'm the Nya node. And then I could say that Dave is also a node. So Nya and Dave are two nodes, and we are connected by our relationship being members of the AI Alliance, for example. That would be the relationship between us. So that is a very simplified version of what is a knowledge graph, right? And how is it represented? All right, let's keep moving. So then we get into what is GraphRAG, right? So how many people have heard of this concept of GraphRAG before? Yes, I got some hands. I love that. Excellent, excellent. Would anyone want to give their definition of GraphRAG? Come off mute. Don't be scared. And if not, I'll give our definition, but please feel free. This is an interactive conversation too. People are like, no.
I'm actually not sure if people can
can come off mute.
Let's see if well, let's give Ritu. So we have let me give you just a second here. We have Ritu who's raised their hand. Let me
I did? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah,
no,
there you go.
Okay, so GraphRAG, do you wanted a definition? So it allows you to create relationships between things like, entities, nodes, and then supposedly it'll form some sort of an understanding of what's going on that, without that didn't exist, because relationships are very important. But this is not a new concept, actually.
Exactly.
Come to think of it as I'm listening to myself. But anyways, I'll stop.
No, that's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. So just to give a simple definition as well. So GraphRAG is a normal RAG process where the retrieval path includes a knowledge graph. Like you had mentioned, this concept in itself is not new, right? But it is pretty novel because lots of people don't know about it and don't know how it works. So simply, GraphRAG is a normal retrieval-augmented generation process where the retrieval path also includes a knowledge graph, right? So in its simplest terms, that is GraphRAG. Thank you so much, Ritu, for that excellent definition. And to give an idea of the GraphRAG process as well, simplified to its most simple terms, we have the first step, which is to do a search, right? So you do a vector or keyword search, right? Some kind of search to find an initial set of nodes, right? To find an initial set of nodes. You will then traverse that graph to bring back information about related nodes. And then lastly, as an optional thing, you can also re-rank, right? So you can re-rank the documents using a graph-based ranking algorithm, such as PageRank, which famously Google had developed. So this three-step process in its most simple term. There's more complexity to this, but I wanted to just make sure that folk are taking back some simple versions of what is GraphRAG. So search, traverse, re-rank. All right. And we want to also say that GraphRAG GraphRAG in general does not look to completely replace your vector layer, right? It is not looking to completely replace your vector layer, although you can completely replace it if you wish, right, with GraphRAG. But I think that GraphRAG is most beneficial when it is added on as a layer onto your vector architecture so that you can get the benefits of both vector search and graph traversal to make this a hybrid search experience. So I think that that's the real key here and the real benefit of using GraphRAG. Okay, so I'm going to keep going on just some of the highlighted benefits of GraphRAG as well. So vector-only architectures are often, like we had mentioned, inefficient when it comes to needing complexity and needing understanding about relationships and context. So GraphRAG helps by adding an additional layer onto your vector-only RAG, which then allows for some massive improvements to your application. So these are some of the keyest highlights that people and researchers have found to be the benefits. So number one, that's higher accuracy, okay? So higher accuracy and more complete answers. And again, I'm going to demonstrate all of this with Alleycat, so I'm super excited to do that. And then number two, once you've created your knowledge graph, once you've created your knowledge graph, then it's easier to build on top, right? So it's subsequently easier to maintain your RAG application. That helps with the development time benefit as well. And then lastly, we have better explainability and governance, right? So because you're able to trace and traverse nodes, you're able to see what is the source of the information that we have here in our application. And so that's excellent information and very, very helpful. So getting into these key things as well, like I had mentioned, higher accuracy. So this was a point of research from data.world. And one of the largest benefits to using GraphRAG is the higher accuracy point, or the quality of your answer, right? So again, this is just one example of a white paper. If you want to have a QR code where it goes directly to the white paper, please read the white paper so that you know that I'm not lying to you. But I have a number of different white papers for folks to read and to learn more about GraphRAG and its benefits as well. So don't take it from me, don't listen to me, listen to the researchers, right? So this paper specifically from the data.world team found that out of 43 different questions, they found that from that specific sample size, the average response quality was 3 times higher on average, right? 3 times higher on average if they use a knowledge graph in addition to vector search, right? So again, this is not new information, right? This white paper actually came out in November 2023. So this is a year plus old paper here. And it's well known that knowledge graphs and the additional context that they provide with regard to the responses that LLMs put as output, it helps, right? It just helps provide that context that a lot of Gen AI applications need. So the second point that I had mentioned was easier development. Why? What are you talking about, right? So the second reason that we hear more people using more GraphRAG over vector-only RAG is that once they've pushed through the initial learning curve of learning about graph technology, learning about nodes and relationships, and learning about how GraphRAG works, then the development process is also easier as well. So for example, here we have this phrase, apples and oranges are both fruits. So if we represent that in graph space, it's actually pretty simple, which is very cool. It's pretty human readable, I would say. So we have apple, right, as a node is a relationship to fruit. Very, very simple graph. Orange is a fruit. So it's very explicit, right, when you're representing these concepts within the graph space. But within vector space, it can look like this, right, with the actual embedding, right, calculation. So this representation is more implicit, right? It could be a little bit more difficult for humans to read an entire embedding and understand. And so we'll have to do complex algorithms to better understand what does that embedding mean, right? Or it can also look like several points on a vector plane as well. So there's lots of different ways to represent these concepts, apple, orange, fruit, right, within vector space. And there are embeddings that can calculate that approximate location. However, within graph space, it's pretty explicit, which is incredible. So another piece of this easier development piece that we've heard as well is that you can run similarity calculations on both the more explicit methods for structural or taxonomy-based similarity on the graph nodes, or you could also use it for implicit or sub-symbolic similarity searches, like Euclidean searches and cosine similarity, right? So a lot of people have heard of these, or even use daily these more implicit similarity calculations on vector stores. But there's lots of different ways to do that. I know this is a lot as well. If you need a break, please, and we'll have time after the Alleycat demo. I'll take all the questions as well. So just write them all down. Feel free to write them in the chat as well, and we'll go through them. And if we don't have time to go through them, then I'll go through them. I'll find a time. All right. All right. Let's speed through the rest of these so that we can get to the demo. The last piece of this easier development piece is that, for example, like when we see a vector embedding, it is very hard for a human to understand it, right? Whereas, so as we can see to the right here, we have a vector embedding. It's pretty opaque. It's implicit, right? Whereas the graphical representation of data is so much easier to understand because it's deterministic, right? It's visual, right? So it helps you better understand what is actually happening in your data, what are the relationships that are happening between these nodes, so that I can really try to get some insights from this information. So the last piece on this easier development piece as well is that when we run search algorithms, both using explicit graph traversals and more implicit methods. For example, we have here for a vector store, you'd use something like the approximate nearest neighbor algorithm, right? So instead of forcing yourself to use implicit and approximate searches, if you add a graph layer to your vector store, it can make that development easier because we now have explicit ways, explicit search methods that we can do to traverse the graph. So that added layer is much better. And lastly, it's this explainability and governance piece. So I had mentioned the traversal piece being really important because you can then traverse the graph. You can then see what's happening within your graph. And it allows for better explainability. This helps with audits of LLM systems, right? A number of people are using LLMs in production with vector-only space, and I'm trying to understand how do we audit a system, right? That does not have easy explainability or traceability as well for where the LLM got that particular information. We all know that LLMs hallucinate a lot, right? Confident, loud, wrong, all the time. So that traceability piece is really key. Okay, so like I had mentioned, don't listen to me, all right? Don't listen to me. There's lots of different organizations and people and researchers who are researching graph, right now. Yes, exactly. I mean, tired of the LLM hallucinations, done with it, right? As you know, when I was developing, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people are like, I'm not going to use an LLM at all, because it'll lie to my customers, it'll lie to me confidently, and it'll just feed me wrong information. So how can I depend on it? Right? How can I depend on it? I can't. So a lot of people just opt to not even use LMs in their development at all. At one point I was like that, but I was like, okay, are there ways? And then, you know, are there ways that we can make this a better process? And that's when I found that adding the knowledge graph in addition to your system can allow for better context to be pulled out, which drastically reduces those hallucinations. Like I mentioned before, the 3 times increase in accuracy. All right. Again, don't listen to me. I have white papers. All right. White papers galore. So LinkedIn actually is also using knowledge graphs. So this is really a really incredible paper as well. Please feel free to either screenshot or, like Tim had mentioned, these slides are going to go out after the talk. So LinkedIn is using knowledge graphs within their customer support sector, which had decreased the number of it had helped with their customer service question answering process as well. So LinkedIn is a huge proponent of using knowledge graphs as well. There's an excellent paper on that, just came out in May 2024. So and here's a key finding here as well, that our method has been deployed with LinkedIn's customer service team for approximately 6 months and has reduced the median per issue resolution time by 28.6%. So that's a key finding of that paper, but there's lots of different white papers on the benefits of using GraphRAG in addition to your vector-only architecture. And this paper as well comes from Microsoft, right? So a number of people know that Microsoft is also talking about GraphRAG and has a big GraphRAG presence as well. So this paper is from Microsoft research team in the office of the CTO on using GraphRAG over traditional RAG for QFS, and QFS stands for query focused summarization with your LLMs, right? So this quote here was that GraphRAG is a technique for richly understanding text data sets, for combining text extraction, network analysis, and LLM prompting, and then as well as the summarization into a single end-to-end system. So Microsoft Office of the CEO research team is also using GraphRAG. So the last slide on all the additional research, this is just so many different organizations who are doing research around GraphRAG now and its impacts on providing context to their LLMs now. So I think that a lot of times, yeah, thank you for the resources. Yes, Amish, thank you. And Tim, thank y'all for putting the actual papers in the chat. So again, this is a number of different resources. As you can see on the bottom here, we have all the research that we found as well is on the website graphrag.com/appendices/research. You can go to that URL and find just a plethora of different research on the impacts of GraphRAG so that you can do your research yourself and find out if this is something that's beneficial for your engineering team. And if not, that's also perfectly fine, right? I'm not here to sell. I'm here to tell you about the benefits that we have found using GraphRAG, that many different companies have found using GraphRAG, and then why I've implemented it with Alleycat, the application. All right. So lastly, benefits of GraphRAG: higher accuracy, easier development that folk have found, and then explainability and governance because of the tracing piece. Now to the meat and potatoes of the talk, Alleycat. Okay, so yes, thank you, team. So as an engineer myself, you can tell me about the benefits of a particular technology. You can give me all the research, and of course, like if you give me all the research, I'm going to do my own research. I'm not going to just trust somebody who's telling me about this thing. You can tell me that all these big companies are adopting a certain technology, but I'm not going to believe you. I'm not going to believe you 100% until I get my hands dirty and I try it myself. So that's what I did. I did this with Alleycat. So Alleycat is a full stack open source chatbot which uses GenAI LLMs to answer questions about your website. right? So the AI Alliance team is the one who had created the Alleycat. So big thanks to Suji and team, as well as both Dave and Tim. There's a number of different contributors. So if you go to this GitHub link right here, you'll see the actually Alleycat repository with all the contributors of the team. And I will also be a contributor because I'm going to be contributing GraphRAG to the Alleycat application. I'm very excited to show you all what it does. Okay. So I am, and let me make sure I get out of full screen mode. Perfect. All right, let me just move this over. All righty. So y'all know and love code. So I was developing this application, and you're probably like, what is all this? This is a mess. What's happening here? So I'm going to give y'all just a short introduction about what's happening within this application in itself, right? So, okay. So before I even dive into this, and so just so you all know as well, like the portion for GraphRAG, this is a full stack application. So it has a front end and a back end. I have created a back end that allows for GraphRAG to be used on this this application. I'm also going to hook it up to a front end as well. Not on this call, but I'm going to do that before creating the PR so that you all can see the, we're going to see the chatbot happen within the terminal for those who are engineers themselves. So we're going to still have that conversation, but it's not going to have the nice, pretty front end that people might want. So just so you know, this is the back end of the application that we're going to be using. All right, in general, so when I had first came across this application, like I had mentioned, this app is a chat interface that you're going to have so that you can have conversations with your websites, gather insights from your website, and use that insight and use that information to then make decisions, right? And I don't want to do it. I don't want to not do it justice. So just in case, Tim or Dave, would you like to give just a short introduction on Alleycat and how it works? Or the benefits of using Alleycat?
Sure, I can just say a couple words if Dave is maybe on a thin connection. Yeah,
Sorry.
Dave, go ahead. Dave, go ahead.
I just wasn't ready for that. Give me 1 second. I'm just getting in a place where I can talk. Yeah. So very quick. So Alleycat has really two parts to it. There's the data ingestion part where it can scrape data from your websites. It can scrape data from PDF files, and you pull all that data, it puts it into a vector database. And then once it's done all that, which is by the way, a fairly complex process of scraping, crawling, scraping, creating embeddings, or chunking, and then creating embeddings, sticking in a vector database. We use Milvus as our vector database, and we're using obviously Neo4j for the graph database.
Yep.
Once we put it there, now the data is ready, and so you can use that for any of your chat open source projects. Just use that process. You can just use it by itself. If you want, you can also use Alleycat as the chat interface as well, and then of course at that point it's now using the data you've just put into the vector database along with, in this case, Neo4j for the GraphRAG combination. And then you can start asking questions via the chat interface, and that is of course being answered using the data from your website, and then putting it into human language using the LLM. That's Alleycat.
Boom, 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 boom. I love it. Thank you, Dave. That's perfect. Okay. So that's an excellent introduction to Alleycat. So if you're going to like pull down and try and please do add a PR. This is open source. If you're going to use Alleycat, you'll see these first these numbered files on the side as well. So these are pretty much the steps in which you're going to run and process Alleycat in general. So the first step that you're going to do is you're going to crawl whatever website that you're looking to crawl. So we have a custom built crawler. I think that Suji and team had developed. So we're going to run this file, which is crawlsite.py. And what it's going to do, it's going to scrape all the information from your site. Sorry, I'm scrolled way too fast. Let me use my trackpad for this. Okay. it's going to crawl, it's going to scrape your website, gather that information, and then it's going to then take all that information and put it into the what I have here, which is the crawled folder, right? So once you run this application, and again, y'all, I'm not going to do it now because the crawling was very, very quick, but the processing took a while. So I'm not going to do those two steps live. What I'm going to do is actually show you what the conversation actually looks like. And so we first crawl all the information from the application. We then put it into the actual crawled folder here. And I'm going over the steps in general, but let me make sure that I grab all the information. So again, for this example, we crawled the AI Alliance website itself. So I ran the crawl site.py file, right, which then populated the workplace crawled file with the workplace crawled folder with 86 different files. And so those 86 different files represent the 86 or at least 86 pages that were found on the AI Alliance website. So once that finished, then I ran step 2, okay? And these are the steps that I did not develop. These are steps that the AI Alliance had developed. Then we ran step 2. And so step 2 actually processes the files. And so what that is actually doing is it is cleaning the HTML, right? It's also then chunking the text itself, and then creating vector embeddings and storing those embeddings in the Milvus vector database. So I had mentioned that it's going to do a process of cleaning those exact markdown files for those who know Python. It's then going to take all of those files and then run a processor, which we have here, processes all the files and then converts them into markdown. That process is what took a couple minutes. So I didn't want to do that live on the call. I did that ahead of time. So we ran that processor, right? And then that processor then took all that information, tracked it, processed it, and then put that into the Milvus database, right? Created the vector embeddings and then put those into the Milvus database. So once those are, once it went into the Milvus database, it also goes into the processed version. So we see before we had the crawled versions of the websites. Crawled versions is just like taking the HTML from the web page, right? Taking all the HTML from the web page and making sure that we're inputting it into this folder so that we can then use it, so that we can then process it. And I had mentioned this to Dave a little bit earlier as well. We had a couple issues with the crawler, just a few, but we can see here that, for example, if we scroll down, the crawler does break the formatting, or it might not be the crawler itself, but something within this process breaks the formatting of the HTML, because as we can see, it goes from a clearly formatted and clearly highlighted HTML file to one that's all black, which means that the formatting breaks for some reason. And I did a little bit of testing with other crawlers which don't break. So this is just a small issue that we have to figure out within the repo, but that can be fixed with a PR. So we go through that crawling, and then it takes all of this regular base HTML and it processes it into markdown files. So we see this here. It turns that same file that we were, the about AI lines file, into a clean markdown file, and then stores that in the Milvus database after it creates the vector embeddings. Oh, I lost network for a second. Hopefully y'all still see me. Okay, I see a thumbs up.
You're good.
Good. All right, perfect. So then after all of that data has been processed, then I had created this this load graph file, right? So that's where the GraphRAG implementation started. So I created another file that's called the 2A. Actually, 2A, we're going to extract a graph. We're going to extract a graph from those markdown files here. And so we have a prompt here, and it's going to be a knowledge graph extraction engine where we're going to create entities and relationships from that markdown file. And Neo4j isn't doing that ourselves. That's we're feeding that information into a LLM, which is going to do that extraction, right? It's going to construct a knowledge graph from all of this information. But right now we're just extracting some version of a knowledge graph from all of the markdown files here. And so we're going to call the LLM to actually do the extraction, then we're going to run it. And then that's when I then do this last step. Oh, that's the IPNB. This last step, which is loading all of that information into the Neo4j graph database. So once we've run the extractor, we're going to load it all into Neo4j graph database, because the Neo4j graph database is inherent to graphs, right? It perfectly shows nodes and relationships, because that's we're a native graph database. That's what we do. So we're going to load all of that information into Neo4j. First, we're going to clear the database if there's anything within the database itself. I created a Cypher query that just deletes everything that's in the database, clear it out, and then creating an index, and indexes are really helpful. It will build a graph. Yes, exactly. It builds a graph per file or across all. Let me just check that. Let me just check. Oh, it's over here. That question, and we'll also take a lot more questions as well at the end. So it'll build a graph per file or one across all the files. It'll build a graph per file. That's a key piece, and that's actually why it took a while to do. And there were some trade-offs to that decision as well. So, and I have lots of notes on why I decided to architect it that way. But we wanted to make sure that we grabbed all of the pertinent information per file. If we had done it across this massive set, it could miss a lot more. So that's the reason why I wanted it to do per file. And that's also the reason why it took a number of minutes in order to finish processing all of that information, because it's a lot of information. It's like 86 different files. Okay, so we load all that information to the graph, the Neo4j graph, and then we can ask questions, right? And then we can do this final step, which is querying the data itself. So I have a run query function, which is going to actually run whatever question that we put, and I'm going to run it now. Whatever question that's put into our little chat interface, we're going to remember we're working on top of vector search. So we're combining the output from the Neo4j knowledge graph as well as a Milvus vector, combining that into one answer. Into one different answer, so that we can gain better insights from that. So, all right, let's run it. Let's run it. All right. So I ran the four query file. So it just tells us some of the logs. We're connected to Milvus. We're connected to Neo4j. Ask your question. All right. So we can ask any question, right? So the Neo4j portion is not going to answer any question that is outside of the data that you've provided. So let's just see, right? There might be a little thing. So let's just see. Who is Steph? Who is Steph Curry? Now, the Milvus portion, I don't know if that just takes in the general information from its knowledge base, but for the Neo4j portion, it's going to be like, I don't know who that is. It's outside of my context. And let me make this bigger as well, so people can see. All right, yes. So Milvus is going to give you a response on who Steph Curry is, even if it's outside of our actual data, right? But that's just Milvus's decision and implementation. But for the Neo4j portion, the graph, right? There's nothing that was involving Steph Curry within our graph. So the graph portion we have at the bottom, there's no specific relationships or additional details found in the graph facts regarding Steph Curry. However, information from the reference passages provides a complex overview of his career and impact. And reference passages is just referring to the Milvus vector store. Right, so they're in conversation with each other about what question that the person had put in. So let's actually ask a question about the AI line. So we're going to ask, what is the AI alliance? sorry about that. Didn't put my question. What is the AI Alliance? All right, it's going to process it. As we can see, all of these different nodes and relationships together. So the AI Alliance developed the Essential Competencies Guide. AI Alliance releases the AI-powered programming language, right? AI Alliance releases Industrial AI Agent Framework. AI Alliance is designed for stakeholders. So we're gathering all this information from the knowledge graph that was created, and now it's able to take in information. Hey, it even says about the bill that we had just talked about, right? AI Alliance opposes, we're not going to use that strong language, but the knowledge graph had gathered that the AI Alliance opposes California SB 1047, right? So all of this rich context that allows you to understand what is the AI Alliance, right? It contributes to global AI standards. So that then comes together, all together, to create this this response, which is vector plus graph. So the AI Alliance is an organization that focuses on advancing artificial intelligence through various initiatives. And according to the knowledge graph, it's taking information from the knowledge graph, it has developed the Essential Competencies Guide, releasing AI-powered information, industrial AI agents frameworks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It opposes SB 1047, which suggests that it is involved in policy discussions regarding and related to artificial intelligence too. So this is incredible, right? This is able to take all the contextual information that we see from the knowledge graph, add it to the vector. Oh, vector store queries should return the last. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that the actual vector store had a problem. But it did grab all the information and generate a response from the AI Alliance. Is there any question that y'all want to ask it? You can either type it up or I can just type it in and we can see how it does, right? This is experimentation. This is demo. I'm looking in the chat. Okay, I have questions coming in. Excellent questions. But okay, so actually we're just going to stop that there and let's get to some questions because I know we're running low on time. How does GraphRAG work? Well, let's go through the whole demo again. Like, so tell me a little bit more, Ritu, on your question. How does GraphRAG work? Because we gave a little bit of information on the entire overview of GraphRAG, but yeah.
We were just saying, like sometimes, Gen AI is so much better at explaining things than any human or any white paper, or anything you can find on the internet. So I was curious how this would explain it.
How this would explain. So
yeah, just like, is it any different than any other, Gen AI trying to explain anything? Does the graph stuff add anything that,
Yeah.
Maybe it
Well,
would,
I think
from that
are
question.
you asking, will this Alleycat Neo4j solution explain GraphRAG? Is that what you're asking?
Oh, will it explain any, differently, I guess? Will it add anything to it? The just vector explanation, the vector database explanation?
Just a quick answer to that. So it probably shouldn't, because I don't think it'll have information about GraphRAG in the actual, but it could. I think it'd be worth asking because it might be somewhere on our website. But to that effect, one thing that we would love to get contributors to is we'd love to add information about our community members, companies, and their projects to our AI Alliance search. So that would be a great example of where somebody asks a question about, to the AI Alliance, how does GraphRAG work? And if we have pulled in the information about our projects, which, Neo4j is a member, our project should be listed there, or through Alleycat, it could end up answering that question.
Yes. That's excellent. And that's a perfect implementation as well. So yes, same thing, Ritu. About GraphRAG, I don't think is centered anywhere within the AI Alliance website. Because remember, the GraphRAG implementation is only taking information from the AI Alliance website. So if it's not there, it's saying, I don't know anything. And that's excellent context and keeping things to a point where, it's not just grabbing information from anywhere, right? It's really important to make sure that For example, if this was company documentation, you don't want it grabbing information from anywhere. You want it just constrained to what is in company documentation. So that's the way that this is built, is that if it's not within that context, it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't have any context on that. Please ask a different question. Yeah, no problem. Okay.
I would like to ask a question. I'm very fond of data storytelling.
Okay, yes.
So make things more clear for people, and seeing numbers like I do now, I'm totally confused.
Okay.
The number of numbers.
Yes.
And I would be nice to make it more human-based. I'm an HR coach.
Okay.
And I do AI, and I think it's my scope is to make things easy for people. It's super simple. Is this possible? This is what's really tempting me.
So you're asking whether GraphRAG in general can make something very, very simple?
Yes, and very visual.
Yes, yes. So absolutely. So what I didn't show in this demo, because we're short on time, is that there is an entire graphical version of all of this data, right? So that is all stored within the Neo4j graph database. I have that running on a Neo4j desktop. And so we can actually query the data that way as well. Very easy, very visual as well. And again, this UI, for example, this UI is only the back-end version of the application. Someone doesn't need to know Python in order to run this. What we'll do is I'm going to build the front-end version of this application as well. And so you can actually just have a conversation directly within the chatbot. It's going to be a chatbot, right? That's the main goal of this application, is for it just to be a chatbot, a front-end chatbot with a little UI, a little bubble, for example, and you should be able to add that to any website to then have conversations using GraphRAG and Vector together in order to get better insights from that website scrape that we had done. So this demo was, I guess, geared more towards like a couple of developers, for example, who were interested in Python and what happens behind the scenes. But you're right. Excellent piece. The goal of this and what's going to happen with this is just the back end portion, is the front end, right? The front end is what the end user sees. It's just going to be a chatbot. There's going to be there is a visualization piece as well that you can see within Neo4j graph database, so that you can actually, if you wanted to get behind the scenes and see the nuts and bolts of what's happening.
That's a relief, because I'm very confident in prompt engineering, and I have a lot of conversation with my AI assistant.
Yep.
My augmented AI intelligence.
Amazing.
And this is what I would like to get results without coding for ages, because I'm not a coder.
Yes, absolutely. So again, you do not need to know Python in order to use Alleycat. Plain and simple. Yeah.
Perfectly all right. Thank you very much. You relieve me. Thank you.
Nya?
Yes.
Hi, great presentation. Just a quick question. I have a question more on the technology auditing side. My question is, how can technology auditors verify or trace the integrity of responses generated by GraphRAG? Am I pronouncing it right? GraphRAG?
You're right.
I am base chat, especially when the chat box to me like evolves over time and pulls from like large dynamic knowledge bases. That's one question. And then my next question, really quick, because I know everybody has questions, so I'm not gonna take over. Okay. I have a lot of questions. Forgive me.
Of course.
Oh my God. My next question is, since GraphRAG and Alleycat are open source, do you think that it makes it easier or harder for organizations to stay compliant, especially if they're using these tools in customer support or public sector systems? Yeah.
Great questions. Okay, I'll take the first one really quick. So how to do the traceability piece, right? So built into Alleycat, or what will be built into Alleycat, is the ability to cite your sources, right? So this traceability piece is really important. And for example, like we have another demo with Neo4j where it's called the LLM Knowledge Graph Builder. For a lot of people, that's just a whole bunch of words put together. But for any either Python developer or a developer who wants to check that out, that's an excellent place in which we present, and that's the visual, in which we present the data. We present it within a visual space, a graph, and then what you can do is you can actually see the different chunks that have been brought up or that have been used to generate this answer. And we also have citations on exactly where in the text that chunk had been generated from, right? So that's a piece that I'm also going to be adding to this Alleycat demo. So where we see, for example, this response, we're also going to have a side piece that's going to say what the sources are for that response as well. So that's incredible, and that's very doable within GraphRAG, just a edit of a prompt. And so the last piece as well, you had said, and remind me of the last piece one more time.
Yes. So since GraphRAG and Alleycat,
Yep.
did I pronounce right?
Yes, Alleycat. Yeah.
Alleycat. Well, the Alleycat, gotcha. Are open source. Do you think that it makes it easier or harder for organizations to stay compliant, like especially if they're using these tools in customer support or public sector systems?
Great question. So and Dave, I know he came off mute for a little bit.
Yeah, I can take this second part.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so open source is has, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like in some ways it helps you stay more compliant because sometimes the community can make contributions that solve like security issues or add new features that are required for compliance before like a single vendor can get to that problem. On the other hand, you're right, like there might be some compliance issue that needs immediate attention that nobody in the community has addressed yet. And there's no one company responsible for implementing that, or there could be like a vulnerability perhaps in the open source project that nobody has been able to address yet. So it can help solve problems faster, but there has to be somebody that you can depend on, and that's why having a company behind the open source project really makes a difference, because then you get best of both. You get community contributions and you get one company that's gonna be behind the project and really help. With Alleycat right now at its stage, it doesn't have a company standing behind it, with a commercial version of it. So I would not use Alleycat by itself for a project that might stand some sort of compliance scrutiny, or where you think there are bad actors out there trying to attack your system. Hopefully we get some company to pick it up and make it as a enterprise grade project. That said, if you are putting together the pieces yourself, which Alleycat is made up of other open source projects, it does include Dockling, it has Data Prep Kit, it has Granite, of course, IBM's Granite LLM for creating embeddings. It uses Llama for the LLM for answering questions. It uses Neo4j for the not yet, but not in production, but it uses Neo4j for the GraphRAG parts of it. So there are multiple projects out there that do have company backings. So if you wanted to piece this together and then use those individual projects with sort of a commercial grade support behind them, you could. And then the last thing I'd say is that if this is a project that you want to use maybe internally, or it's a smaller company that's doesn't think it's going to have like bad actors purposely trying to attack it, then Alleycat would be a great project. It's also great for learning. This is a project that will be used for a lot of education that members of the AI Alliance are going to be sharing, IBM and possibly others like ServiceNow and maybe Meta. We're putting together that right now. So from an educational perspective, I think it's also an excellent project. It was built really first and foremost for education, and then secondly, as a tool you can run yourself. And eventually, because we are getting more and more support from a broader set of companies, I imagine there's a good chance this does become commercially supported at some point, but not right now.
Perfect.
Thank
One
you. Thank you
thing-
for your responses. Also, let me just say real quick, Alleycat and GraphRAG. I said it right.
Yes.
Awesome.
did
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
One
And by the
question
way, I do
more.
want to mention we do have a lot of questions here, and so we can keep going. At some point, we may not get to all of the questions, but thank you for the questions to everyone so far. And let's see, that was Zion asked that question. And let's see, if you want me to keep going here, I can take some of the next, or I can ask some of the next questions for you, Nya. For example, here's one that I think is a good question from Raj. How can we create a learning feedback loop that detects anomalies in the file patterns over a period of time? Now, I'm going to augment this question, which is, first and foremost, if in general, is there a way when you pull in the data into the graph, is there a way to update that graph with new data without having to delete the whole thing and then recreate it?
So in the way that I've built it, no, but I'm an engineer, right? I can just build it so that it can. So yes, there is a way to do that. There is a way that we can do that. Right now, just in like quick demo purposes, I had built it just to clear out the data and then input the new data. But I can make before I make my PR, my pull request to the repo, or like before I show the official version for those who are non-technical, I can implement a portion where it just like updates pieces that are not, so like if there was a piece of data that's in the knowledge graph already, and I can either just have it rewrite completely or just augment and add on information right after. So absolutely, it can be done.
Okay, yeah, and by the way, another add to that is, since it's crawling a website that is mostly, in our case, our website is mostly static.
Yes.
Having to delete all the data and rebuild it again is from a user perspective, I think it's fine, right? It's just because you're searching across the whole thing anyway. It doesn't really matter what the index IDs are. So I think that's perfectly fine. In the long run, I think imagine a scenario where you want to keep your GraphRAG data up to date in more real time, and deleting and rebuilding everything every time probably doesn't make sense. So but that's not where we're at right now from our own website perspective. And I think a lot of websites have a lot of data that doesn't change, every minute. So, or even every day. So I think it'd be perfectly fine for those projects.
Amazing. That's perfect.
Okay, let's see. Now the question specifically was a learning feedback loop that detects anomalies in file patterns over periods of time. Anomalies to me is kind of, it's anomaly is an anomaly. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that, but I think that it might mean, if you're looking for things perhaps like API calls, and there are API calls that you expect, and then there are API calls that you don't expect. And so maybe, is there a way for it to look for unusual nodes or unusual data?
Dave, I can talk about it. Yeah. So we deal with structured data, and let's say claims data come in millions, and then certain times certain columns would come.
Oh, so sorry, I should have talked to you maybe.
Yeah. So I was explaining that we might have certain columns missing certain times, and over the period of time, the data set, we will have to figure out if certain columns are missing and kind of treat it as an anomaly, right? So that was my question on the anomaly part.
Okay, so you're trying to figure out if there are some anomalies, right?
Yeah.
That exist within the data set, and you're trying to use GraphRAG in order to find that information?
Yeah, so we're pretty much kind of storing metadata.
Yes.
And we are to see where we are, in fact, thinking about creating a metadata knowledge graph.
Okay.
And see how we can extend GraphRAG for a metadata knowledge graph, right? It's going to be interesting, but yeah, to know how we could use it for like detection of, anomalies on schema or pattern or data. Yeah.
That is interesting. Okay, so I haven't done that myself yet in my own testing, but I can see the architecture of how it could be done, but I'd have to do more digging and to understand your particular use case, and to understand like the ways that GraphRAG could be used to help with that process. So I think that let's connect either on LinkedIn, and we can talk.
Yeah. Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank
let's keep going here. By the way, apologies, I had a call come in, and I think I was unmuted for a moment there. But next question is, have you checked for the quality of answer for the same question with simple RAG versus GraphRAG to see the difference? And a quick initial answer to that is, no, we have not. I can tell you that in general, there is definitely an improvement when you use GraphRAG for this kind of data, where you have relationships like, companies and projects and people. Like, it's going to be much better at identifying that, or events, cities, speakers, that kind of stuff. But in general, Nya, do you have any information, any reports maybe to share, research to share about, how GraphRAG can be improvement over simple RAG, and maybe under which use cases?
Absolutely. So I think that number one, the resources that I provided, and again, these slides are going to go all out. There's a lot of different resources that we have that shows the impacts of using GraphRAG in addition to RAG versus just using, GraphRAG in addition to vector only versus using vector only. So there's research and benchmarks that exist. Those links are in the slides as well. So we're going to send that out. And then even in my own testing for Alleycat, actually, yes. So not in this iteration of Alleycat, but actually a previous iteration of Alleycat that I had been developing, I was just trying to see, just as an engineer being inquisitive, I was just trying to see what are the difference in responses between, like, I actually had done a vector only, I run the initial vector only version of Alleycat, and then I had added on, I created actually a little UI toggle where you can toggle on GraphRAG and then toggle it off, and then see the difference in the responses. And so I had, then again, this is all just my individual testing as an engineer. I had seen that when we added on the GraphRAG portion, the responses had much more depth, took up all that more context as well. Versus just using that vector only side toggle. That's not the version that we published because I didn't want this to be a GraphRAG versus a vector store. I wanted it to be them using both. But if you did want to see, like, what are the differences in response, just to try and understand the impacts of GraphRAG as well, we have those white papers that are in the slides, and also possibly I can figure out how to do a demo of that. But the goal was to have them both vector and graph working together in order to get your response.
Okay, great. Now, this is a simple question, and I may be able to answer this one. Yeah. So if actually the next two questions are kind of simple. So from Mario, he says, if it builds a graph per markdown file, how do you perform a search on the entire site?
Okay, so if you build graph per markdown file, how do you perform a search on the entire site? Yeah,
because it's kind of like each markdown file is, I think, is basically the chunked file. So when the graph process chunks the like if you take like a let's say it just had a long research PDF file. Yeah. It's gonna chunk it, and and it may chunk it into hundreds of chunks. So you end up with hundreds of chunks. But how would you put together a graph for the entire document when you have all these individual chunks?
Yes. Okay. Great. Because I was like, oh, it's not always inherent. Okay. So the way that it does that process is actually through the LLM. So the LLM, it's going to take all the chunks as well, and then the LLM is going to create what are the relationships between these chunks, right? So, and that's directly taken from the actual AI lines, like file structure or folder structure, or the website structure. So it's going to take that information of how these things are actually connected, and then the LLM's using that information in order to generate this knowledge graph with lots of different chunks. And I should have demoed the actual knowledge graph as well, so that you all can see the visual aspect of that entire chunking. But it's all created based on the actual file structure of the website.
Okay, so great. And then
just one question. When will we have the next meetup where you can show us the visual part, the front end?
We have to schedule another one, a follow-up to this. It's
Yeah,
one of-
you know what? We're going to go live with this on our website. So at some point, we should, have you back and we can walk through how it works, live.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. So next question here. So you mentioned, you kind of touched on this, but can you explain how it connects to the LLM and what kind of LLM is used? And I think there's two places where it connects to the LLM. One you just mentioned was in the actual process of taking the individual, chunks and turning them into nodes. And then there's the actual query itself. When somebody asks a question, where is the LLM involved?
Yes, and that's absolutely correct. So like you had mentioned, the first place is in when it is extracting the graph from the markdown files. So we're using an LLM, we're using a LLM wrapper, which is called Light LLM within this implementation. And then we're also using, I have an OpenAI key as well. So both are doing slightly different things, but the wrapper just makes it easier to interact with the LLM. But so it's in that extraction process of where it's like extracting a graph from that data. And then again, it's being used just like Dave had mentioned when we're actually doing the query itself, right? It's taking the natural language query from the user and then grabbing the top K number of responses from the LLM, from the data set. And then, and from that, it's then generating a response based on the chunks that it had grabbed from the knowledge graph and the chunks that it had grabbed from the vector store or Milvus database in this instance.
Great, thank you. And then, so how can technology auditors verify or trace the integrity of responses generated? I think in this case, it's by RAG or GraphRAG, really, based chatbots. So if it's, especially when the chatbot evolves over time or pulls from large dynamic knowledge bases. So in other words, there are definitely ways in which you can use evaluations to evaluate different RAG interfaces. For example, there's RAGAS, R-A-G-A-S, I think. And then there's how do you pronounce that?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. And then there's another one called, I think it's the Open Graph Eval project. Anyway, there's RAGAS is the most popular one, I think, and it will help you evaluate the quality of your RAG chats. There's probably something that you can use for GraphRAG as well. I just don't know what it is. Do you happen to know, Nya?
Or evaluations?
Yeah, evaluating the quality of the answers that you're getting back.
Yes. I'm sure we have a number of different tools, but I'll be able to provide a list.
Yeah, I bet you do have one, or that there's somewhere somebody's created one for GraphRAG. But to answer a little bit further, I think the one where the data is changing over time is that becomes really difficult because you cannot test every question. The data might be changing, the questions might be changing. Instead, all you can do is evaluate the process and the quality of the questions and answers so far, and hope that leads to more consistency, so that your evaluation of what you've seen so far implies the evaluation that you will get in the future. Maybe there's some other way to handle this. I don't know. But we got to keep going here because I think we got like 5 minutes tops. So let's keep going here. Is there any public information about the results of the cipher queries, or how the cipher queries are passed to the LLM? I'm curious, and this is from Margarita. I'm curious to get better understanding of technical details behind the scenes.
Yes, lots of different resources. Some of the cipher queries are, and let me see if I can actually find some of them. So we have the query. Some of the cipher queries are manually put into the LLM, and then some of them are actually generated. So if I can't find it here, then I'm actually taking a I took a copy of all the questions that were put into the chat. And so if you also, for anyone else, if you also have any questions that are put in the chat, into the chat, and I can't answer them in the next 5 minutes, then I'm going to come up with a document that answers all of them, provide screenshots of whatever responses comes out of the application in its current form as well, so that you all can get your direct responses. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and we still have a lot more questions here. So
I know.
we may
That's
only
what
go take a couple more.
Yeah.
Let's see. So how do you combine? So how is it working that you're able to actually combine answers from both the vector database and the graph? Like, first of all, the individual process, does it query the graph first and then use that subset of content to then send it to the LLM with the question to then get the answer? Is that how it works?
I would say read that back to me one more time because I was trying to follow.
Yeah. So, so how do you combine? See, you've got the data that's in the graph, and you also have the data that's in the vector database, right? And the data is, I would say there's data that's similar in both, but they don't both have the exact same data. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So then, first of all, I guess to answer her question, this is from Ritu. How does that work? It's going to go query. What does it query first? Which, the graph or the vector database?
It queries the graph, and then it queries the vector database, and then we use the LLM to combine the conversation, to combine the responses together. I see. Very good. Okay. So it's not like there's a join between the two. No. Okay, got it. All right. So that makes sense. And so what if there are differences? Like, is there a way to reconcile them or prioritize them? Yes, it's actually in the prompt. So if there are differences within the responses, we within the prompts of the LLM, we're telling it to state that there are like conflicting responses, for example, and then it will instead of just combining them, right, it'll state that, okay, here's the response from the vector store, here's the response from the graph, they are conflicting, and it'll actually have that statement. We have that in the prompt. Got it. Okay. And then from Patricia, is the user interface for GraphRAG Python? And are there differences between Alleycat and GraphRAG? I think she says, my understanding is Alleycat is for light. I'm not sure what that means for light, but to just answer your question, currently Alleycat, if you download it from the repo, it does not have the integration with Neo4j in it. You'd have to get that from Nya's repo. We are going to be adding it into that. And so Alleycat will then be a GraphRAG, so RAG plus graph application. But right now it's just a GraphRAG, meaning it does not include the graph database content. I hope that answers Patricia's question because we got to keep moving here. Let's see, good stuff. Love your energy. Okay, cool. Would you use GraphRAG for dense financial data from spreadsheets? You absolutely can. You absolutely can. So a lot of our use cases as well for GraphRAG and Neo4j in general is for fraud detection within finance. So you can use it for financial information. You can use it to detect fraud as well. Lots of different use cases within finance, definitely. Okay, cool. There's a question here about can you ask complex questions in Alleycat? I'm going to answer quickly, which is right now I would say Alleycat is not a super advanced solution. However, it does use it does use a very large, it does use Llama as its model. You can use other models too. You can, it's open source. If it doesn't already support a model, it most likely is not. It's most likely trivial to support a different model. And the same goes with vector databases, by the way. If you want to use, we've done it with Milvus, of course, but you can also use it with Weaviate, or you can fairly easily add other
vector databases. For our graph, we're probably just going to be using Neo4j. I haven't had any requests for something other than that. And it is very powerful and popular, so we're pretty happy with that. Vector databases are a little bit more, you can swap them out a little bit easier. Okay, a couple more questions here. In another GraphRAG demo implementation for Microsoft, there was an issue that data ingestion was using LLMs heavily and generated high costs to create the graph compared to RAG. I think that is a reason for approaches like lazy GraphRAG. Have you ever heard of lazy GraphRAG?
I actually haven't. This is really interesting. I don't know if Yolanda's on the call as well. Yolanda's my colleague who's been at Neo4j for a little bit longer. Yolanda, if you are here, have you heard of lazy GraphRAG before? I personally have not.
No, I have not.
Yeah.
Look at it.
Yeah, we're going to look into it. We haven't heard of it before. So definitely a place to explore more and to learn more about it.
Okay, let's see. It says here, Mario says, if you can generate the Parquet files, there is a website where you can load and visualize it. Oh, that's interesting. Mario, if you happen to know where that website is, you can maybe put it in the chat.
Please link it.
And then Avanish answering a question earlier, I think from Mario. Avanish says, we've built a RAG platform for financial data. So they are using it for that, but how would we go about evaluating migrating to GraphRAG? One thing I'll mention, I was at a conference once where they were talking about this, and they were using it to identify fraudulent money transfers.
Yep.
And so they were using a lot of financial data, but then what they did is they attached to it the people that were being transferred and then the connections of those people to other people and companies. And then they were able to identify very quickly the people who are somehow related to other fraudsters. And this is like government stuff, so they're using like phone calls and emails and all this kind of stuff. And so but I'm curious, like, so that's how you would do it with GraphRAG. You could attach the two that way, almost similar to, maybe instead of attaching to a vector database, you attach it to a SQL database. But I wanted to ask you, like, can you just take data straight out of a Excel spreadsheet? Like, let's say you have a huge Excel spreadsheet and put that data into a graph. Would that work?
Yeah, so we have a lot of data import methods. So you can take it from CSV files, spreadsheets, even like either unstructured data as well. And you can take that all and you can put it straight into a graph. There's a small import process, but I think we just released a new importer, I think yesterday as well, to make that process so much simpler. So absolutely, there's ways to do it.
Okay, cool. And by the way, Mario did put a link to the visualizer from Now or Never.
You.
Yeah, EV GraphRAG visualizer. So it was at the 10:25 a.m. timestamp. Okay. We are so out of time here. There's some good questions here. Nikhil asked, do we have ways to create an interactive graph visuals on full data, as well as for the output of the query as an interactive graph where users can click on points, move them? Yeah, do you know of anything open source related to that?
Do we have anything to create interactive graph visuals on full data, as well as the output query and incentive as an interactive graph where the user can click on?
Trust Graph have something similar to it. I have seen it once. So, like, if we can implement something similar, like, I would like to know, like, how we can do it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Neo4j in general allows for that process.
Okay, so can we integrate in our projects, or like how does it work? Like, if I want to show it for individual query, like I'm more interested in like when we get the output individual query, can we show a graph of it, and can user get interact with it on our platform? Like, how can we do that?
A per query graph.
Yeah, like a new graph per query. If you add a query, add a old new graph to old graph and integrate it somehow, like you can show some links or something like that.
Yes, I've seen it and I've done it myself. So let's
Wow.
let's chat as well. Send me a LinkedIn request and let's chat.
Yes, yes, yes. I just sent you. Like, let's have it. Yeah.
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 Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
And by the way, one way to wrap this up, I apologize we didn't get to everyone's questions, but we will definitely do a follow-up, Yusuf and others who have asked. We'll do a follow-up on this. So please, if you register through Meetup, or if you want to go to our, oh gosh, I should get the link to our office hours. You can also contact me. I'm going to put my email address right here again. Okay, you can contact me. I just put it in the chat at 10:36. Also, Chirag, who just asked the question, and Nikhil asked, I think, a question earlier. They are working on a project called Open Governance at opgov.ai, where they are using Alleycat. Well, they haven't started using it yet, but they're evaluating Alleycat and will be hopefully contributing to Alleycat.
Mine's looking at audio much better now, maybe because people turned off cameras. Cool hat night.
Sorry about that.
I don't know what that was. Anyway, so if you want, in the link there, opgov.ai, hopefully they will be using Alleycat for its data scraping of countrywide city council meetings to then let people, ask questions of their own city council based on the meetings that they've had in the past. And I am working on a separate project where we're doing that same thing for conferences, where people are speaking and they have slides and they have, descriptions of the talks, help you figure out, which conference you want to attend or which session you want to attend. If you're interested in either one of those, join us in the Alleycat project, and we will, include you. And perhaps you have your own use case that's similar to one of those two that you would like to add. With that, though, I got to go. Appreciate you all joining. I'm sorry I can't get to the last few questions here, but Nya, great presentation, lots of energy, lots of answers. You brought the goods, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we definitely will invite you back. I feel like we're on like a talk show, late night talk show. And you had a great session, and I'm going to come on camera too. And a great session. And, now we're like, oh, this is great. We got to do this again, right? So
exactly. Let's do it again.
It is overwhelming, but it was awesome. And I like your style, and it was really fun. Even if I have a long talk now with ChatGPT, because I copied everything, every screenshot. So I will talk to him. And but thank you very much. It was a great insight. And I'm looking forward to the front end.
Yes, I got you. Make it easy for everyone. I got you, Rob. Thank you again. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This is such a blast. Let's do this again. And I'm so excited to talk to you all more about GraphRAG, even in more explainable terms. So thanks so much.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say is it turns out that Nya and I are both in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. Yes. So I am going to predict that Nya will be coming to one of our AI agent meetups soon. So stay tuned.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great one.
I really appreciate you.
Take care. See you soon.
All right. Bye all.